This story is called My Parents Secretly Charged $133,000 to my credit card for my sister's graduation trip. She turned my card into a souvenir and bragged about it, so I froze the account and canceled their bookings. When she returned, a surprise was waiting for them. Hey everyone, before we dive in, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button if you enjoy content like this. It's free, helps the channel, and ensures you never miss out on great videos. Now, let's get started. So, this is probably going to sound like something out of one of those crazy Reddit posts, but this is actually what happened in my life. My name is Caleb, I'm 29, and if I had to describe my role in the family, it would be that I'm the responsible one. You know, the person who ends up fixing things when everyone else messes up. But what happened recently? Well, that took things to a whole new level. Let me explain. I have a younger sister, Madison, who is 23 and just graduated college. She's smart, driven, and honestly, I've always been proud of her. We're not the closest, but I try to be supportive when I can. For instance, for her graduation, I got her a laptop she'd been hinting at for months. It wasn't cheap, but I thought it would be a thoughtful gift. She loved it, and I felt good about fulfilling my role as the older brother. Growing up, our parents had a very unique approach to raising us. And by unique, I mean wildly inconsistent. I was always the responsible one, the dependable child who worked hard and built my own life. By the time I was 23, I was financially independent, working in finance, and proud of the career I had established. Madison, on the other hand, was the baby of the family, pampered and adored. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister, but it was obvious from the start that she was the favorite. She never had to take a part-time job or help around the house. She always had the latest gadgets, the trendiest clothes, and the best of everything. Meanwhile, I focused on my own goals and tried not to dwell on the favoritism, even though it stung at times. Anyway, a few days after my sister's graduation, my mom called me. Now, my mom is quite the character. She's not mean exactly, but she's the type of person who believes she's always right and doesn't hesitate to overstep other people's boundaries if she wants something. When she wants something, she'll justify it in her mind no matter how ridiculous it might seem. So, she calls, and right away, she's super excited. "Caleb, you're not going to believe what we've done for Madison's graduation," she says, practically buzzing with excitement. I chuckled a bit. "What's the big surprise?" I asked, expecting her to mention they bought her some nice jewelry or maybe threw her a party. She dragged out the words, "We booked her a month-long trip to Europe." Isn't that amazing? I was honestly surprised. "Wow, that's a huge gift," I said. "I didn't know you guys were planning something like that." "Oh, it's going to be incredible," she replied, clearly proud of herself. "First-class flight, 5-star hotels, private tours, nothing but the best for our girl." At this point, I was impressed. My parents aren't exactly wealthy, but they're comfortable enough. A trip like that sounded like something they'd been saving for a while. Then, my mom added, "And of course, we used your credit card to book everything." I froze. "Wait, my credit card?" I asked. She said it in such a casual tone, like she was just telling me they borrowed a cup of sugar. "Mom," I said, "why would you use my card without asking me first?" "Don't be so dramatic." She dismissed me, like I was overreacting. "We needed the points for upgrades, and we know you're doing well financially. You can handle it." By now, my heart was racing. "How much are we even talking about here?" I asked. She hesitated for just a second before replying, "It's about $133,000. I felt like the ground beneath me had just collapsed. $133,000? I repeated, my voice rising. "Yes, Caleb," she said, clearly annoyed now. "It's for your sister's graduation." It's a once-in-a-lifetime trip. You should be happy for her. Mom, I said, trying to control my growing anger. That's an insane amount of money, and you didn't even ask me. Do you realize how serious this is? Oh, stop it, she snapped. You're being ridiculous. We'll pay you back. You're acting like we committed a crime. This is basically theft, I shot back. You used my card without permission. That's illegal. Don't be so dramatic, she repeated. We're family, Caleb. Family helps each other out. You've always been such a jerk. Why can't you just do something nice for once without making a big deal out of it? That hit a nerve. A jerk? I said incredulously. You think I'm a jerk for being upset that you maxed out my credit card without asking? I got Madison a laptop, Mom. A nice one. That was my graduation gift to her. This trip is not my responsibility. Oh, please, she said, now fully exasperated. That laptop was fine, but this is her graduation. It's a milestone. Don't you want her to have something to remember it by? Sure, I said, my voice tight. I just don't understand why that means I should cover the cost for something I never even agreed to. My mom let out an exasperated sigh, as if I were the unreasonable one. We'll pay you back, Caleb. Stop making such a big deal out of this. You have a good job, don't you? What's the issue? The issue, I said, is that you charged $133,000 to my card without asking me. That's not just a little mistake. That's massive. You could have at least checked with me first. Well, if we had asked you, you would have said no, she replied, as though that were a reasonable justification. Exactly, I responded, because it's not your money to spend. You're impossible, she snapped back. We raised you, Caleb. We gave you everything. The least you can do is help your sister celebrate her accomplishments. I don't understand why you're being so tight-fisted about this. At that point, I was too furious to keep going. We'll have to revisit this another time, I said, trying to calm myself. Oh, whatever, she shot back, her tone final. But honestly, Caleb, we're leaving soon. I don't see how we'll have any time to discuss it. I hung up, needing a moment to process what had just happened. I quickly opened my credit card account, and there it was. Every charge, clearly listed in black and white. Flights, hotels, tours, and more. $133,000 of my money gone in the blink of an eye. I kept trying to recall how Madison and my parents even ended up with my card in the first place. A few weeks ago, Madison had mentioned needing to pay for something related to a school trip, and my parents had vouched for her, assuring me she would pay me back quickly. So, I gave her the card to make the payment, trusting her. I didn't think twice about it since she was my sister, and she'd always returned things before. What I hadn't realized was that she never gave it back. I hadn't even noticed it was gone until now, and it was clear that she'd kept it for her personal use. Now, I couldn't stop thinking about how they had done all of this so casually, without a second thought. How they had assumed I'd just go along with it, no questions asked. How they had completely disregarded my feelings and acted as if I was the problem. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. Things were going to change, and I would make sure of it. I'll keep you updated. Update 1. Hey everyone. I didn't expect to be writing an update so soon, but things have escalated in ways I never thought possible. So here I am, typing this out, while still trying to process the chaos that's been my life. After that initial conversation with my mom, I felt a mix of disbelief and anger. Part of me thought, maybe Madison didn't even know the trip had been charged to me. After all, my mom is usually the one who calls the shots, and Madison has never had to worry about money. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. I checked Madison's Instagram, and the moment I saw her posts, my blood began to boil. She wasn't just on the trip. She was clearly loving it. The pictures she posted showed stunning views, luxurious hotel rooms, and extravagant meals. Her reality, while mine was a nightmare. Madison and my parents were already living it up on their expensive European tour, with my money funding the whole thing. I could barely contain my disgust. They hadn't even bothered to talk to me about it first. No apologies, no explanations, just a complete disregard for everything I'd said. They acted like it was their right to spend my money, as if I didn't even matter beyond being their personal bank. Then Madison had the audacity to text me. At first, it seemed like a harmless message, just a few pictures from her trip. Beautiful scenery, posh hotel rooms, artfully plated dishes. My jaw tightened with each photo. She wasn't just enjoying herself, she was flaunting the fact that she was living the high life on my dime without asking. It wasn't just inconsiderate, it was disrespectful. And then came the final straw. Madison sent one more picture, a close-up of her suitcase with a luggage tag made from my credit card. The caption read, "Carrying your contribution with me everywhere." I stared at the photo, my hands shaking with rage. It felt like a slap in the face. She had turned my stolen money into some kind of twisted trophy. It wasn't just a mistake, it was pure entitlement, and I was done letting them walk all over me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Who turns a credit card they weren't supposed to use into a keepsake? I immediately texted her back. "What the hell does this mean?" Madison replied with a laughing emoji. "Relax, Caleb. It's funny. You've been working so hard. I figured you'd want to be part of the trip somehow." Part of the trip? As if I wasn't already paying for the whole thing. I responded, "Madison, this isn't funny. Do you have any idea how much this trip cost me? $133,000. That's years of hard work, savings, and careful planning, gone." Her reply was a total joke. "Oh my God, you're so dramatic. Mom said she'd pay you back. Why are you acting so upset? This is a big issue. You're doing okay financially, right?" I felt as though I was having an out-of-body experience, like I was talking to someone from an entirely different world. I tried explaining again that this wasn't just about the money. It was about the fact that they did this without consulting me, maxed out my credit card, and left me to deal with a massive financial mess. Her response? "Well, maybe if you weren't so uptight, you'd understand how much this trip means to me. You should be happy for me and stop being such a buzzkill." At that point, I realized that trying to reason with Madison wasn't going to get me anywhere. She seemed totally unaware of how serious the situation was, and my mom wasn't exactly stepping up to take responsibility either. I knew I needed to take real action to regain control of my finances before things got even worse, so I decided to call the credit card company and dispute the charges. I assumed it would be a simple process. After all, I hadn't authorized any of this, and that should be enough to get things moving. Little did I know, that decision would make the situation escalate in ways I couldn't have foreseen. When I called the credit card company, I calmly explained the situation. My parents had used my card without permission to pay for an extravagant trip for my sister, and I needed the charges reversed. I didn't try to sugarcoat it. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. It was a blatant misuse of my financial information. Initially, the representative seemed sympathetic, saying, "I'm so sorry to hear this happened. Let me pull up the charges and see what we can do." I waited, hopeful this would be an easy fix, but after a few minutes of typing, she came back with something unexpected. "I've reviewed the account," she said, "and while I completely understand your frustration, these charges don't technically qualify as fraud." I was stunned. "What? How is this not fraud? I didn't authorize any of these purchases." She explained carefully. "It appears the card information was used by someone you willingly shared it with. According to our policy, that doesn't meet the criteria for fraud." The truth was, My parents had my card details because years ago I gave them to them for emergencies, like unexpected bills or medical expenses. I had trusted them completely, never imagining they would take advantage of that trust. But now I realized that not only had Madison used the physical card, but my parents had also felt entitled to use my card information for bookings and upgrades. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a coordinated betrayal by the people I thought I could trust most. I asked, "So, because I gave my parents my card information, they're allowed to max it out without asking, and there's nothing you can do about it?" She hesitated and then said, "Unfortunately, since you shared the information willingly, we can't classify the charges as unauthorized." "Have you spoken to your parents about reimbursing you?" I wanted to scream. Of course, I had spoken to them. They think it's no big deal, which is why I'm calling you for help. "I understand," she said, her voice annoyingly calm. "If you'd like, I can transfer you to our billing department to discuss a payment plan for the outstanding balance." A payment plan for $133,000 that I never even spent? I felt like I was living in a nightmare. "No," I said, barely holding back my frustration. "I'm not interested in a payment plan. I want these charges reversed." She apologized, saying, "I'm really sorry, but under the circumstances, there's nothing more we can do on our end. If you'd like, I can file a report to document the situation, but it won't change the status of the charges." I ended the call feeling utterly defeated. I had hoped calling the credit card company would give me some leverage or a way to start fixing this mess. But instead, I was stuck with a maxed-out card and no real options. At that point, I didn't know what to do. My trust in my family was shattered, and I was lost. So now, I'm asking for your advice. What do you think I should do next? Update 2. Here's the latest in this ongoing mess. If you've been following along, you know my parents used my credit card without my permission to fund Madison's $133,000 European graduation trip. When I called the credit card company to dispute the charges, they told me it wasn't fraud because I had willingly shared my card info with my parents in the past. So that option was completely closed off. After hanging up, I felt trapped, like every attempt to fix this was hitting a brick wall. But then it dawned on me while reading your comments. Just because the credit card company couldn't help, that didn't mean I had no other options. If the charges were made without my consent, then the companies my parents booked with didn't have my consent either. That's when I realized what I had to do. I couldn't go through the credit card company, but I could go directly to the airlines, hotels, and tour operators. If I could prove that the purchases were unauthorized, maybe I could at least cause some trouble for this ridiculous trip. So, I started with the airline. Madison, bless her Instagram-loving heart, had posted multiple selfies at the airport before departing, complete with airline tags and her first-class seat number. I dialed the customer service number and said, "Hello," doing my best to sound composed and professional, though I was far from it. "I need to report an issue with a ticket purchased using my credit card." The representative asked for some details, so I provided the flight number, the date, and Madison's full name. "The problem is," I continued, "this ticket was booked without my permission. The cardholder information on file is mine, but I did not approve this transaction." There was a brief pause as the rep accessed the reservation. "Okay, I see the booking," they said. "Can you confirm that this charge was fraudulent?" "Technically, yes," I replied. "It was made by a family member who used my card without my consent." "I understand," they said. "Unfortunately, since the ticket has already been issued and used for the outbound flight, we can't cancel the reservation outright. However, I can place a hold on the return ticket while we investigate further." "Perfect," I said. They explained that the hold would prevent Madison from checking in for her return flight until the payment issue was resolved. They also flagged the reservation in their system, meaning she'd likely face extra scrutiny if she attempted to make any changes or upgrades. Next, I focused on the hotels. Madison had tagged every luxury property she stayed at, making my task surprisingly easy. I started with the most recent one, a 5-star resort she'd raved about in her stories. "I'm calling about a reservation made under my credit card," I said. "I need to verify some details." The receptionist asked for the reservation number, which Madison had conveniently posted in a photo of her room key. After pulling it up, I explained that my card had been used without my permission, and I needed to stop any further charges. "I understand," the receptionist said. "I can suspend incidentals for this room, which will prevent the guest from charging anything to the stay. Would you like me to disable room service and minibar access as well?" "Yes, please," I said, trying not to sound too pleased. After handling that hotel, I repeated the process for others Madison had tagged. Each call took time, but the result was the same: incidentals disabled, services suspended, and reservations flagged for payment issues. Then I turned to the tours. Madison had been posting nonstop about these exclusive, once-in-a-lifetime experiences: private yacht rides, vineyard tours, hot air balloon trips, you name it. Most of these were with boutique operators that had direct booking lines. I called one of the yacht companies, pretending to be the cardholder who'd paid for the reservation. "There's been a mistake," I said. "I didn't authorize this charge, and I need to cancel the booking immediately." The person on the other end hesitated. "I see the reservation here, but it's for tomorrow. Are you sure you want to cancel? We won't be able to refund the payment." "That's fine," I replied. "Cancel it anyway." They agreed, and within minutes, Madison's luxury yacht experience was no longer booked. By the time I finished, I had disrupted nearly every significant part of her trip. The return flight was on hold, hotel services were restricted, and several high-end tours had been canceled. I wasn't trying to ruin her life. I just wanted her and my parents to feel some of the consequences of what they'd done. It wasn't the perfect solution, but for the first time since all of this started, I felt like I was finally taking back some control. I knew they were going to lose it when they found out, and they still had no idea what awaited them when they returned. "I've got a surprise planned, and let's just say it will be unforgettable. That's it for now. I'll keep you updated." Update 3. Hey everyone, here's the next update. And let me tell you, things reached a level of chaos I didn't think was even possible. So here it is. I didn't mention in my last post that I also froze the credit card account entirely. I figured, if they were so determined to spend my money without asking, the least I could do was make it a little harder for them. What I didn't fully realize at the time was how quickly this would unravel their entire trip. As the notifications about declined charges started flooding in, I felt a wave of satisfaction like I hadn't in years. I wasn't just standing by while my family steamrolled over me. Madison had been relying on the card for every aspect of her trip: hotel incidentals, tours, transportation, even food. Without it, everything came to a halt. So when she called, screaming, "Caleb, what the hell is going on? The hotel says my card isn't working, and I can't check in anywhere. I'm stuck." I couldn't help but smile. She was finally getting a taste of the consequences she'd ignored for so long. But I kept my voice calm. "Madison, it's not your card. It's my account, and I froze it because it was being used without my consent." She let out a frustrated sigh, saying, "Are you serious? What am I supposed to do now? I can't even buy food." I replied, "Maybe you should have considered that before allowing Mom and Dad to charge this trip to my card without asking." She then began ranting about how selfish I was, accusing me of ruining her once-in-a-lifetime experience. I told her this wasn't a conversation I was willing to have over the phone and ended the call. Shortly after, My mom rang, and when I say she was furious, I mean she was yelling into the phone, "Caleb, what's wrong with you?" She shouted, "You've left your sister stranded in a foreign country. Do you even care about what you've done to her?" I nearly laughed. What I've done? Mom, you're the one who maxed out my credit card, leaving me with $133,000 in debt. This isn't my fault. Don't even try to blame me, I said. She yelled back, "You're her brother. You're supposed to support her, not sabotage her." I wasn't about to let her guilt trip me. You made this mess, not me. If Madison's stranded, that's on you. You should have thought about the consequences before deciding to steal from me, I retorted. She began sobbing, accusing me of destroying the family. I hung up before she could continue. I thought that would be the end of it for the day, but a few hours later, my dad called. Unlike my mom and Madison, he wasn't yelling. He was using that calm, disappointed dad voice, which honestly got on my nerves. "Caleb, we need to talk about what you've done," he said. "Funny," I responded. "That's what I've been saying this whole time." He ignored my comment, saying, "This isn't how to handle things. You've left your sister stranded in Europe. Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused her? And do you know how much trouble you caused me when you maxed out my credit card?" I fired back. "What about the trouble you caused me?" He sighed heavily, like he was talking to a stubborn child. "I understand you're upset, but this is family. You could have talked to us instead of making things worse," he said. "I did talk to you," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "I told you this wasn't okay, and you brushed me off. What did you want me to do? Just let you ruin my finances?" "Caleb," he said in that annoyingly calm tone, "you've made your point. Can you at least unfreeze the account so we can get Madison home?" I didn't hesitate. "Figure it out yourselves," I said. After that, I stopped responding to their calls. I figured they'd figure out a way to resolve it, and I wasn't going to be their backup plan. Over the next few days, I heard about the chaos through extended family and acquaintances. Apparently, Madison went to the hotel desk to order room service, only to find out she couldn't charge anything to the room. They demanded upfront payment for the stay, and when she couldn't provide a working credit card, they canceled her reservation. She had to drag her luggage to a much cheaper, less glamorous hostel, one she could barely afford even after pooling cash with my parents. I also learned that my mom was furious, blaming everyone except herself. She reportedly spent hours calling relatives back home, begging for money to salvage Madison's trip. A few family members pitched in enough to keep them housed and fed, but all the luxury plans Madison had been bragging about, like private yacht tours, fine dining, and vineyard tours, were canceled. The worst part for them was that Madison's return flight was flagged because of the payment issues I'd initiated. She wasn't allowed to confirm her seat until the issue was resolved. According to someone there, she tried to charm her way past the problem, but the airline staff weren't having it. They told her she needed the cardholder, me, to call and fix it. Madison reportedly broke down in tears at the counter, and my mom went into full meltdown mode, yelling at the staff and demanding they fix it. They didn't, of course. Eventually, my parents scraped together enough money to buy her a cheap one-way ticket home. The whole ordeal delayed their return by a few days, and from what I heard, it was a nightmare. Meanwhile, I filed a formal fraud report with the police. I'd already given the credit card company all the evidence they needed, and they were investigating on their end. But I wanted to ensure there were real consequences for what they'd done, especially since they showed no remorse. The police took the case seriously. I provided them with copies of text messages, screenshots of Madison's social media posts boasting about the trip, and detailed invoices from the travel bookings. They told me that once my family returned, they'd likely be called in for questioning, At this point, I'm just waiting to see how they react when they finally get back. One thing's for sure. I'm done letting them walk all over me. I'll keep you updated. Final update. Hey everyone, here's the update you've been waiting for. And trust me, it's a crazy one. When my parents and Madison finally returned from their disastrous trip, they didn't get the welcome home they were expecting. Instead, they were greeted at the airport by the police. I mentioned this in the last update. I reported a fraud case while they were still abroad. It wasn't an easy choice, but after everything they had done, I knew it was necessary. The investigation took a while, but by the time they returned, the authorities were ready to question them. A friend of mine, who I had sent to the airport to observe, told me the situation was utter chaos. Police were waiting by the gate, and as soon as my family came through customs, they were stopped and pulled aside for questioning. Madison, as expected, started crying almost immediately, loudly claiming that her spiteful brother was the real victim. My mom, however, went straight into defense mode, arguing with the officers and insisting it was all just a misunderstanding. She even tried to play the family card, saying that family matters shouldn't involve the law, as though that could somehow erase the fraud they had committed. Needless to say, that didn't work. The police had all the evidence they needed: screenshots of text messages, Instagram posts from Madison bragging about the trip, and charges on my credit card. They made it clear that this was not merely a family argument. It was fraud, plain and simple. My parents were furious, claiming they were being unjustly targeted, but the officers told them they had to come in for a formal statement. As usual, my dad tried to play the calm and reasonable one. He supposedly told the officers that I was overreacting, and that this was simply a family dispute blown out of proportion. The police weren't convinced. They let them go home for the moment, but informed them they would be contacted for further questioning. After hearing this, I thought they might keep a low profile, and maybe even take some responsibility. But no. The very next day, they showed up at my house demanding an apology. They started by banging on my door so loudly that it woke the neighbors. When I opened it, there they were, my mom, red-faced and holding the invoice I had sent them, my dad looking stern and self-righteous, and Madison glaring at me like I was the worst person on earth. Before I could say a word, my mom stormed inside, followed by the others. "What is this?" she shouted, waving the invoice in my face. "Is this some kind of joke?" "It's a detailed breakdown of everything you spent on my credit card," I said calmly. "I thought it was only fair to show you the full amount." "Unbelievable!" she snapped. "You humiliated us, ruined Madison's trip, and now you're trying to play the victim? You owe us an apology." I stared at her, stunned by her sheer audacity. "Apologize for what?" I asked. "For stopping you from stealing more of my money?" "You didn't have to handle it this way," my dad interrupted, his tone maddeningly calm. "You could have talked to us before escalating things to the police." "I did talk to you," I replied, frustration rising. "And you dismissed me. You called me selfish and dramatic, like I had no reason to be upset. So yes, I escalated it because nothing else would get through to you." At that point, Madison finally spoke up. "You didn't just ruin the trip, Caleb. You embarrassed me. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to have my reservations canceled and be treated like a criminal at the hotels?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous. Humiliating? Try being the one whose trust was shattered by his own family. Try being the one stuck with a $133,000 bill because my parents thought my money was theirs to spend. Stop acting like the victim. My mom, her voice shaking with anger, replied, "We told you we'd pay you back." "With what money?" I asked, genuinely curious. "If you had the means to pay me back, You wouldn't have needed my card in the first place. We're your family, Caleb, she shouted. Family helps each other. That's what you're supposed to do. No, I said firmly, standing up. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't put each other in impossible situations and then play the victim when they're called out. What you did wasn't helping. It was betrayal. And now you're here demanding an apology from me? Unbelievable. The room went quiet. They weren't expecting me to stand my ground like that. But I wasn't finished. I'm done letting you treat me like this, I continued. I'm done being the one who fixes your messes while you all walk all over me. You've shown me how little you respect me, and I'm not tolerating it any longer. My mom tried to argue, but I cut her off. This isn't up for discussion. We're done. I don't owe you anything. Not an apology, not forgiveness, nothing. Now, it's time for you to leave my house. My dad muttered something about how I was tearing the family apart, and Madison rolled her eyes before storming out, slamming the door behind her. My mom was the last to leave, muttering under her breath about how ungrateful I was. When the door finally closed, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I wasn't sad or guilty for standing up for myself. I felt relief. Now, to answer the big question, how did I get my money back? After freezing my account and flagging the charges, the credit card company launched an investigation. It wasn't easy. There were weeks of back and forth, and they initially argued that it wasn't fraud because I had willingly shared my card details with my parents. But I didn't give up. I provided every bit of evidence I had. Text messages, screenshots of Madison's posts, and a detailed comparison of the charges versus my typical spending habits. Eventually, they ruled in my favor and reversed all the charges. Seeing that zero balance felt like a massive weight had been lifted. Since then, I've changed all my passwords, opened a new credit card, and frozen my credit to ensure this never happens again. As for my family, they are facing the fallout from their actions. The fraud investigation is still ongoing, and I have no plans to intervene. They made their choices, and now they must deal with the consequences. To everyone who has supported me through this madness, thank you. Your help has been a lifeline. If you're dealing with something similar, remember, you don't owe anyone your peace of mind, not even family. For now, I'm focusing on myself. And honestly, life has never felt better.